Hi, I'm Joe. Welcome back. This is the Ultimate Love Letter. Thank you for joining the conversation. When God grows silent, all that He's communicating in that moment is to remain where we are. I've had a period of God's silence like I've never known. Like I've never known since knowing God, if that makes sense. I want to speak for a moment to those who perhaps you've never heard God speak. And when I say you've never heard God speak, please know God is speaking, He is communicating. Perhaps we're unable to hear it. And if we're unable to hear it, we understand the reason is because our mind, the world around us, has become so loud. We have allowed it to become the loudest voice for us. The way we are to hear what God is communicating in every moment is to cultivate a period of stillness that can be obtained through meditation, through quiet prayer, by just sitting in the presence of God, reading the Bible, your devotional, journaling, any practice that we have that quiets our mind is when we will begin to hear God speak. But I'm speaking to those who perhaps you are in continual conversation and communication with God, like me. And so when we are asking God for clarity, guidance, when we're asking God for a prayer and we hear crickets and we know it, we know it's not us. We know it's God deliberately growing silent. That is our cue for two things. One, we are to remain where we are. There is no action to take at that moment, in those moments. And two, what I've learned just recently in my spiritual journey, when God grew silent, what He was saying in the silence, and I can just sense that deeply, so that maybe perhaps He really didn't go silent. What I sensed He was communicating within His silence is, you are seasoned. You know how to proceed. What do you know? What have I taught you about this season? It was almost like sink or swim. The image I got within me was, when you've been training a child how to swim, and this certainly happened to me, but if you're training a child how to swim, and then they got this, and then you just fling them in the pool, like, okay, you know what to do. Swim. Test out those sea legs. I felt that is what God was communicating within His silence. You know how to proceed. You know all I have taught you about this season. You know what to do. Will you do it? It's the moment where God, not that He releases your hand, because He never does, but it's almost like He wants you to show yourself that you have absorbed all His teachings, that you trust in how to navigate the seasons where it's dark, it's unknown, and yet God seems to withdraw in quietness. Not that he's gone anywhere, but so that you can strengthen your walk, so that you can strengthen and grow in the lessons that you already know. It's almost like no more babying. Like you are seasoned. Take a few steps ahead of me. Take a few steps on your own. I'm still here. I still have you. Can you navigate for a little while? Can you balance just on my truth, just on my word, just on the past lessons? And as I began to understand what God was communicating within the quietness of what I thought was not communicating, I just proceeded as I normally would. I just proceeded forward, just in the complete faith that God has not left, in the complete faith that if God has grown quiet, then he knows I'm ready for that much silence, that I know what to do, that I can stand firm on God's promises. I don't need him to continually reconfirm it over and over in every hour, in every minute, like I was doing. Right? I found myself in a very dark, a very testing season. And I was just looking to God, like literally, like almost every minute, like, God, am I okay? Am I okay? Am I okay? At some point, it was like God was silent. You know you're okay. You don't need me to reconfirm it. You are okay. What have I taught you? Can you proceed for this moment in silence? Can you know what I am saying without me saying it? Oof. That's a pretty seasoned spiritual walk. So, when God grows silent, he is essentially saying, make no sudden moves. God will always guide. When we come to a crossroads, where we come to a point where a decision needs to be made, God will definitely make that decision with you. He knows the route we ought to take. He's giving us free will to decide whether we take that route or not. But God will always show up when it's time to move mountains, when it's time to decide. So just know, if God has grown quiet, there's no decision to be made at this moment. And it could be anything. It could be perhaps you're applying for a new job and an opportunity has presented itself to you, and you want to know, should you be taking this job? If God is silent, perhaps there is no movement to be made now, essentially saying, not the job for you. The problem is we make rash decisions as humans, and we feel that we know better. We feel that there is a decision that needs to be made in this moment, and we need to make it. And if God is silent and he's not showing us those moves, then we're going to make it regardless. No, no, no. We have missed the mark. If God has not guided us to take action on something, no matter how bad you think you ought to be taking action on it, if he is not speaking, there is no action to be taken. And what I find in my own journey is, usually when I yield to that, when I'm like, I want to get this done now, God, I need a response, and he is not giving me one. When I release that, when I'm like, you know what, fine, I'm putting this down, I'm not going to pick this back up until I gain clarity on it, I'm going on to the next thing. And as I move on to the next thing, what I find is shortly after, maybe a day, maybe a couple of days, maybe an hour after, God will then say, okay, remember that thing? Yeah, you were supposed to accept that. Remember that thing? Yeah, that person handled it, so you don't need to. Remember that thing? It's no longer a thing. I made it go away. That is what God does when we are yielding to Him in every situation. When God grows silent, understand the truth, He has not left. When God grows silent, understand the truth, He is communicating within the silence. Perhaps the silence is telling you no action. That is a communication. I saw a post the other day on Threads and it just resonated deeply. It said, God has not left. You know, when you're in seasons and it's dark and you feel like God has left, this post was speaking to that. She said, God has not left, but will you leave? And isn't that true when we find ourselves in a testing season, a season of darkness, and we feel like God has just forsaken us and He's left? Then we're like, forget this. I'm out of here too. You're out of here, God. So I'm leaving also. He hasn't left. His promises are to always be with us, to go before us, to go with us. That is 100% truth. I am living proof of that. God has allowed me in about, I don't know, 3 or 4 very profound situations where I could actually feel His presence. And if I haven't spoken about it yet in previous conversations, I will certainly come around to speak about that when God lays it on my heart. But there were very clear moments in my life where God allowed me to feel the warmth, literally the warmth of His essence. I felt His presence almost in form. God is here with us always. He may be silent. It may be because He wants to show us something, or because perhaps you can't hear it because we're too busy in our mind. We got to find out which is true. One is true for sure. When God grows silent, don't run. When God seems to withdraw, can you understand the truth? He is with us. He is present. I don't know. I'm getting guidance to share something here. I don't know. It felt like I would have shared this already, perhaps last week, but I'll share it again now in case you missed it. As I said, God has been silent for about 6 weeks in my life. Yes, 6 weeks. And within the silence, yes, I was asking God to communicate. I need a resolution to this thing that I'm dealing with, and I need to know which way to go. Just tell me which way to go. If it's left, I'll go left. If it's right, it's go right. If I need to jump, I'll jump. God knows. Whatever He's telling me to do, I'm doing it. Like, that's how I live my life. And He wasn't saying anything. So in my moments of just waiting and just still pleading with God, like, God, today am I going to hear from you? I remember I woke up and I was reading my devotional. And as I was reading it in my mind, I usually hear my voice, but this morning I was hearing God's voice. As I was reading, it was in God's voice. And it was the most gentle, most pure, most loving, most like like kind of like joyous, but another, I don't know, something, another word, but joy. Joy, most joyous voice ever. It was just clear and just saturated in peace. It was God's voice. And when I started to register, wait a minute, like this is God speaking to me, I closed my eyes almost to reset, opened my eyes again, and I started reading again. And sure enough, God's voice. It was his voice reading the devotional. And as I paid attention to what I was reading, he was saying, I hear you. Your desire to hear me pleases me. And I just broke down and I just cried. I wept. I cried out loud because here it is. Just the night before, I was in a frantic state, yearning to hear God's voice, yearning to hear him communicate. And here it is the next morning, he is communicating in his voice the very message that I have been asking by saying, I hear you. I don't know how. I don't know how anyone doesn't believe in God when there's just such profound moments of God just revealing himself in every moment. I mean, a sunset, a sunrise, the moon, the stars, birds, earth, health, us, humans, weather. God speaking directly is just, it's so profound. It's so magical. It's incredible. And God, I pray for those that don't find you, won't look for you, don't care to know you, don't believe in you. I cannot imagine. What a sad life. What a sad, sad life. Well, all I want to finish by saying is when God grows silent, don't run. He's there, and his silence is still communicating something to you. Can you hear what he's saying in the silence? Can you proceed with all that you know, with all that he has taught up until the moment he goes silent? He will only go silent for a moment. In my experience, he only went silent. Well, it was several weeks, but he was still communicating within those weeks. But within the silence, I was able to discern what he was communicating. So essentially, he didn't grow silent. I hope I haven't confused anyone, with that. But when he does get a little quieter, don't go. He's there. He's still watching over you. He's still protecting you. And like a father looking over his child, he's just wanting to see can his child walk a few steps on their own? Just like a father with a year-old baby that has been training her to walk. And father just finally releases the child to see how many steps the baby can take on its own. I felt deeply that's what God was doing for me, not to me, for me. In his moment of silence, allow him to do his powerful work in you as well. Thank you for joining us on this special Convo 80. Until next time, love yourself and love others. We'll chat again soon. Bye for now.